Well, folks, in today's video, we're going to be working on this vintage lifelike Santa Fe GP38 locomotive I picked up off of eBay. I found this locomotive in a lot with a whole bunch of other locomotives, all being sold in non-working order, and when we tested this thing a while back, it was not showing any signs of life whatsoever. The lights were not working, nothing from the motor. So I'm not 100% sure what that's all about. If I were to take a guess, it's either a bad wire or a bad soldering connection, but there's no way of knowing until we actually open this thing up. Overall, the locomotive appears to be in decent condition. It's got most of its parts. You know, there are dings and scratches here and there. But the thing I'm more concerned about is the fact that it's sitting very unevenly. It's heavily tilted this way, so I don't really know what's going on there. But we'll try to rectify all that today, and hopefully we'll have a working locomotive by the end of this episode. I'll take it over to the track. I doubt there's going to be any difference, but we'll just see, and then we'll go from there. Probably going to be a challenge even getting this thing on the track just because it's sitting so unevenly. Let's try giving it some power. Okay, I'm putting 12 volts in, and I'll try to move the drive manually. And what we're seeing is that there's just nothing happening. There's no headlight on, we're not hearing anything from the motor. So the engine's not getting power for one reason or another. So let's take it back over to the workbench and see if we can change that. So to start off, we're just going to remove these two screws. By the way, for anybody who wants to get into restoring HO scale locomotives, this is probably where I'd start. A lot of people ask, what's the best brand to start with, and honestly these like last generation, I think they're third generation lifelikes, are pretty easy to work on. You can identify them because they have actual windows, and yeah, they're just probably the most straightforward brand to work on, and you can find them really cheap. So I would suggest let's try to see if you can pick one up at like a train store or a train show for like 10 bucks or less and practice on it. If it's already broken, you don't really have much to lose. Now, in this case, we might have already found our problem. Just as I suspected, we have a broken soldering connection. There's no solder on that whatsoever. So we'll try soldering that back on, and we'll see if maybe it will fire to life. I'm kind of thinking somebody's been in here, though, because that screw looks sort of stripped. So, yeah, I don't know. We might be in for more trouble than I thought. I'm just going to get a little bit of flux on there, and then I'll put some solder on the wire, just sort of tin it. And then I suspect this is why the whole thing isn't getting power, because the light also feeds off this same wire. So if there's a problem here, it's a good place to look. Okay, that seems all right. Another thing you should always check on when working on these types of locomotives is that the connections down here are solid. Just give the wires a little pull, because sometimes the connection breaks, but the solder is still attached to the wire, so it looks like there's a solid connection even when there isn't. So always just give the wires a little tug. This wire looks kind of sketchy, but I think it's going to be okay. So I'm going to plug in my controller. We'll connect some leads up to these wheels and see if it will go. Lo and behold, it does seem to run. No light though. Oh, both wires broke off. Well, let's see if I kind of hold that there and put some power here. We can at least test the light. Yeah, light works fine. So we know the drive works. It actually sounds pretty healthy, but the thing I'm a little more concerned about at this point is just fixing that weird tilting issue. Now, I've had a look at this locomotive, and I think that the chassis might actually be warped, because this truck seems to be sitting evenly right here. So I think what I'm going to try to do is actually just remove it and then try to figure out a way to get the chassis back into place, because I've already seen it won't sit properly on the track and it's just going to derail if we don't try to resolve that. So I'm going to remove this right here. Always be careful when you remove these, because they're actually spring loaded for the brushes which go to the motor, and if you're not careful, you'll lose the springs. I've done it countless times, so I speak from experience here is what I'm saying. So I'll just take this one out as well. And you can see the springs coming out there. Yeah, let's try to collect those, and the brushes are also there. Those are the brushes. To remove the motor, you just push in clips on both sides. On Bachmann's, it's a very similar procedure, but usually there's actually a piece you have to unscrew. pull that out, and there's the whole motor assembly. And sure enough, it is pretty warped. All right, we've got the whole chassis clear. Look at that, this is broken off. I didn't even notice that. I guess we'll try to re-adhere that to the shell. But here we have it, the chassis of the locomotive. And I'm gonna try to change the angle just so you can see how bad this is. So just to demonstrate how it's slanted, I've just put the truck back in. And you can see for some reason it's a little bit more biased to this side. So I'm guessing that the mold was just not done quite right, and it ended up warping the plastic. So I went ahead and I reinstalled this truck. However, this time I did it backwards. So now if we look on this side, it's just under 2 centimeters. And if we rotate it, also just under 2 centimeters. So I don't know if that's an intentional design or it's just coincidentally better, but I think that that's solved the problem, or at least I hope. So I think at this point we could put the engine back together and it would probably run okay, but before we do that, I just want to check in on the drive and just make sure everything is okay. This actually looks really good so far, so that's great. We'll just make sure that there's nothing in here that shouldn't be. I'm not overly concerned, but why not? And while we're in here, I'll just throw a little bit of oil in. So I was trying to figure out here why the wires wouldn't reach anymore. I didn't remember them being like that, and I realized I think I made a mistake. Yeah, the wires were supposed to go through this hole, not that one, so that's why they're so much shorter now. Unfortunately, I already soldered these on, so it looks like I have to undo that. Even after years of working on these models, I still make mistakes sometimes. Most times. All right, well, I think at this point we've got the whole locomotive back together, so I guess we'll just throw the shell on and then hope for the best. All right, moment of truth here, folks. Have our efforts paid off? Yes, they have. We've got a runner. It doesn't seem half bad. Still seems like it's ever so slightly tilted, but it's definitely not as bad as it was before. I think the frame is just a little bit warped. But hey, she's running well. And yeah, it's not derailing. So I am very happy with that. Just to really make sure this thing doesn't have any derailing problems, I set it up on the mountain layout, and it's just handling it mint. It's flying around here without any issues. I'm really impressed. I mean, this has got a lot of weird bends and obviously some slopes. Not a single problem. So I went ahead and hooked the locomotive up to a 12-car consist if you include the caboose. Now let's see how well it can pull this. It does have some heavy cars. Doesn't even struggle. Just look at that. I should point out too, the current draw is like nothing. Wow, even decent low-speed performance. Isn't that impressive? How low can it go? Yeah, that is not too bad. Well, I think I'm going to wrap the video up here. I hope you all enjoyed. I am absolutely thrilled with this thing. It was a little bit of an odd project, especially with the fact that, you know, it's even still a bit unbalanced. But in any case, it's working very well for an engine of its price point. So yeah, no complaints there. But anyways, with that, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching.